released. See, I bring things up I don't know how to do. So this week, we're in the second week on, I think it's like a 4 or 5 week series. It's a long one, but it's about building community. And it's just because right now when we look around and we see people so isolated and separated and off on their own, especially in times that just feel so high pressure, it's important that this building not be a sanctuary, but this community be a sanctuary from all that's happening and all of that. So we always start, or ever since I've been here, we start with a discussion question, and that's really an opportunity to build community, to talk to your neighbors, and to get to know people a little better. So this week, our discussion question is, what was your first impression of Holy Covenant? You can also frame it to like, what makes a good first impression, right? Like what makes you feel comfortable and welcome when you arrive? So turn to your neighbors, maybe cluster up in little groups of 2s, 3s, or 4s, and get to know people a little bit better. Okay, how many people said the stained glass windows? None? I mean, that might have been one of my answers. I mean, they're pretty gorgeous. I heard someone in the back say, I was just greeted, right? Like, you know, it felt like they were happy that I was there. And no one likes to be in a group that it feels like it's unhappy if you're there, right? Like no one likes to go to the party and like, you know, no one talks to you, right? Like that's like a worst case scenario. And so any other good standout responses? Anything? No? Okay. I covered them all with those 2 simple things. So before I was a pastor, I was a part of a small group at this church, and it's part of what kind of helps nurture my call to ministry. It was honestly one of the best spiritual clusters of people that I'd ever been part of. So I started as a new member. It started as a new member group of a church that I love. So this church had like 1,800 people there every Sunday. So in an effort to not get people lost, you know, every month they would have this like get to know the church, and then it would be like a 6-week class, and then it would be a small group, right? And that's kind of how our small group formed. And there were about 12 of us. And on paper, and honestly in real life, it was kind of perfect. Right, we had a great collection of people. We had like this interracial gay college student couple. We had a married couple in the 40s with friends. We had single women. We had single men. We had a married woman whose husband wasn't really a church person. We had a 75-year-old lesbian that everyone lovingly called Aunt Cheryl because she was everyone's aunt in that group. And she gave some pretty thoughtful and insightful theological perspective that just came from years of experience. My old roommate from St. Louis, Doug, is here, and he knows the group. They were amazing. We all shared the same core values, but we came from very different places, and just somehow it worked. Anyone ever been in a group of people that somehow it just worked, just meld together well? We learned together, we had good, healthy disagreements, we prayed for one another, we showed up when someone was sick or when they lost their job, and we attended each other's weddings. We really mastered the art of doing life together. It was the kind of community people talk about when they say this is what church should be. And honestly, we kind of look like a DEI diversity stock photo. And the love was real, but we did have one little bitty problem. It was a problem that we didn't really notice at first. We weren't really good at welcoming new people. The first person we tried to add to the group came a few times, but we didn't do anything wrong exactly. We weren't rude to them, right? But we were just kind of comfortable with each other. We had inside jokes, we had shared history, and we had a rhythm that worked for us, and that rhythm wasn't really good at integrating extras. It seemed almost like we loved each other and we tolerated her, and so she came a few times and then she quietly decided that the group wasn't for her. Then it happened again and again, and after 3 or 4 times we eventually stopped trying, right? We stopped welcoming people in because we're like, you know what? Our group is fine, we're like a family. We told ourselves that our group was solid, that the 12 people was a good number, that depth mattered more than growth. And then life started happening. Grad students, as grad students do, got married and moved away. They moved out of state. Aunt Cheryl reunited with her ex, and she moved to California. And another woman got married and didn't start coming as often. And then another couple had a health problem, and another couple, they'd been driving 45 minutes each way to get to the group, and because there were fewer people, the energy wasn't there, and slowly and quietly, that beautiful group began to disappear. By the time I moved away, we were down to 3 people for what was basically a book club that no one read the book. And I talked to my old co-leader this week, because, I don't like telling stories without permission, and she told me that they don't even meet anymore. The community didn't end in conflict. It didn't implode. It just kind of faded. And looking back, I'm convinced of this. It wasn't a lack of love that ended a group, and it wasn't even a lack of intention for new people. It was just a failure to be intentional about welcoming. That experience changed the way I think about church. It taught me that communities don't often drift apart because they stop caring. They drift apart because they slowly turn inward. And that's true not just for small groups, but for worshiping communities and whole churches or friend groups themselves. Because worship isn't primarily designed for the people, or groups aren't designed for the people who already know where the bathrooms are, or who already understand the rhythm, or who already feel at home. Of course, the people who are here matter deeply in our groups. We all matter, our stories matter, and our faith matters. But if a faith community is shaped only around the preferences of the people in the room, then without realizing it, we begin building a space that feels harder to enter from the outside. The question isn't, do I like this? The deeper question is, would someone new feel safe here? Would they know where to sit? Would they know what's happening? Would they feel seen rather than exposed? And we've all been in a situation like we were talking about with the kids this morning, right? We've all been in that situation where we were kind of sitting alone in the corner and everyone else knew each other. And the beautiful thing about it is that Jesus, almost all of Jesus' miracles are ways that he solidified community. When he healed the leper, he went out to the person that was outcast and did whatever it took to bring them in community. Even that time, he made sure the rager kept going, right? Feeling the water, turning the water into wine. It was his work at ensuring that community still happens, because I'm convinced that God happens in community. Whenever I was in the 7th grade, I was like this really kind of awkward kid. Shocker. I was kind of pudgy, obviously gay, had a bad acne problem. I had all of those like middle school terror things, and I knew them better than anyone else. And it was the first day of the 7th grade, and it was the first day of the 8th grade, and I was sitting by myself at lunch. And this new kid, this guy that was in town, he had moved in with his aunt and uncle, so he already knew everyone. He was popular from the start. It was my old roommate, Dave, and he comes up to me and he says, "You're not a loser, stop sitting by yourself," and came over and sat next to me. And that moment changed my life, right? Because I had friends and I had people around, and I wasn't just this like awkward kid sitting by himself. And we never know what someone's backstory is going through. We never know what they're carrying to that sitting by themselves at the table. We never know if their parents are fighting or if they're struggling with something or any of that. We never know whose life we can transform by extending a simple welcome. And one of the things I've learned as a pastor, and honestly, it's just one of the things I've learned by watching people, is that you can tell a lot about a group of people by how it treats the person who doesn't quite know where they fit yet. Anyone seen Mean Girls? I think that's why the position of greeter here in the congregation, which is ironically the hardest position to fill, is also one of the most important. Making people feel welcome and seen from the day they walk. Cam walked up to me, "They need help with anything?" I go, "Yeah, help her on a greet." Because truth is, sooner or later, all of us become the person who doesn't know the space we're in. There are seasons of life where we walk into a room completely unsure of ourselves, carrying grief or shame, doubt, questions, or wounds we don't quite know how to name yet. And as a faith community, that's especially important. People typically come to faith communities in times of transition. They usually come because something in their life has changed and they just want something steady. And that's one of the most beautiful things that we have to offer a world that feels so broken right now. And whether we stay in a community or quietly disappear often has less to do with theology or music or even preaching. And it has more to do with this quieter, simpler question, is it safe for me to be here exactly who I am? And that awkward person didn't really change a lot, but feeling belonging gave me confidence to say maybe being a little overweight wasn't the end of the world, and maybe all teenagers have acne, and maybe all of these things that I was using to build negative stories about myself weren't really the end of the world. So the group of friends that I got that would invite me to poker and do all these things, they didn't fix me, right? They didn't change me, and they didn't expect me to grow. They just wanted me to be present. And wanting to be present can literally change an entire trajectory of a person's life, and we never know the ripple effects from that. So welcome isn't necessarily just being polite, and it's most certainly not being extroverted, because have you ever seen an introvert be greeted by an extrovert? They get a little scared. Sometimes that quiet, simple welcome, that quiet, simple invitation just recognizes the humanity in the other person. You don't have to be good at small talk. You don't have to be loud or outgoing. All you have to do is practice welcome. And that's a spiritual discipline. And hospitality is simply what that welcome looks like when we organize our life together. It's a way of embodying the love of Christ before a single word is spoken. And some of you already know the kind of welcome that we practice every single week. It doesn't have to be loud or performative. It's just noticing who's standing alone, paying attention to who looks unsure of where to sit. And that's not just at church. That's in life. That's in the workplace. That's in our friend groups or our family. You know, nothing is more awkward than when you bring a partner home and no one talks to them, right? And they're just kind of sitting in the corner. And this kind of welcome doesn't come from a badge or a title. It comes from choosing to see the people around us, just like God chooses to see each and every one of us for exactly who we are. In a faith community, the welcome isn't necessarily the pastor's job, right? Because it's the pastor's job, right? Like, it's the pastor's job. So people feel more welcome when other people come up and greet them and love them and support them. My message went away. And that gets us to a little guy named Zacchaeus. Anyone knows, what's the first thing you think of when you think of Zacchaeus? It's a wee little man. Yes! I asked that same question at Free last night. No one knew. No one knew. Not a single person knew. But we all think of Zacchaeus as a wee little man that climbs up into a sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see, right? And in this story, we've reduced Zacchaeus. Go figure. The modern world reduces someone to a physical attribute. Shocked. But in this story, sometimes we get so distracted by the wee little man that climbs up into the tree. I mean, it's kind of a good visual, right? I get it. And it's catchy for a kid, and it helps them know a story. But the real story of Zacchaeus is actually far, far, far stronger than that. Zacchaeus wasn't just short. He wasn't quirky. He wasn't just curious about Jesus. He was a tax collector. And in the Roman Empire, that meant something very specific. And he wasn't just a tax collector. He was a chief tax collector. Tax collectors were collaborators. Tax collectors were like modern-day ICE agents, and he was the sergeant deciding where to go attack. They were members of the Jewish community who worked for an occupying power. Rome used them to extract wealth from their own people, to fund imperial roads and palaces and armies. And these tax collectors didn't just collect what was owed. I mean, what's really owed by an occupying force, right? But they didn't just collect what was owed. They skimmed, they exploited, they got rich off their neighbors' suffering, all while sitting in the middle of the community that they were causing to suffer. From the community's perspective, tax collectors weren't just annoying, they were traitors. Zacchaeus wasn't misunderstood. They understood exactly who Zacchaeus was. He was participating in a system of harm to his own people. So when Jesus comes to town and Zacchaeus climbs into a tree just to catch a glimpse, no one is rooting for Zacchaeus. The crowd isn't thinking, gosh, I hope that sweet little guy gets to meet God. No one says, I hope this goes well for Zacchaeus. And then Jesus does something that is completely unexpected. He stops, he looks up, and he calls Zacchaeus by name. And the chronologically, whatever, the timeline of this story matters. Because Jesus looks up, sees and notices Zacchaeus, looks him in the eye before Zacchaeus does an ounce of repentance. Before he promises to change or make anything right. And Jesus says, hurry, or he says, Zacchaeus, hurry, come down, for I must stay at your house. And I'm going to pause real quick to say Zacchaeus was kind of putting himself out there. So although Jesus recognizes Zacchaeus, right? Zacchaeus also had to take a little bit of risk. Sometimes if we want to belong and we want to be a member of a community, we have to do things like show up to spaces that we know no one, or maybe just met the pastor outside of a parking lot, right? Sometimes we have to put ourselves out there in order to experience the kind of belonging that Christ so freely offers us. But Jesus says, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. Must. That's not a might. That's not an after you clean things up or once you prove that you're sincere. Must. Jesus does not say, Zacchaeus, you need me. Jesus says, Zacchaeus, I need you. Which is strange. Because if we're honest, Zacchaeus looks like the last person that Jesus would need. He's complicit. He's benefited from harm. He's participated in systems that hurt people. But as a community, we have to stop calling people out and start calling people in. The more we push people to the side and say, you don't belong here, you've done wrong, you've done this, we send them on a whole journey. This isn't in my notes, but I'm fired up. Do you know why Christian nationalism and the Proud Boys and all this far-right extremists is happening the way it is right now? A lot of people I know started off as well-intentioned people. A lot of them. They came into well-intentioned spaces and maybe they used the wrong word or addressed someone in a way that maybe those of us that understand social justice a little deeper would see problematic. And instead of inviting them into community where they could grow and thrive, we called them out and pushed them to the internet. Once they're on the internet, they can find dark web circles and online chat groups that validate the hate and don't make them feel like crap. Sorry for getting too political, but the right does a really good job at letting people know they belong, and the left does a really bad job at it. We do a really bad job at it. And then once they're in these online chat groups and their hate and ideas start getting validated, what happens? Evil grows. Evil grows in isolation. But what thrives in community, right? What thrives in community is that there's 5 kids here, and unless you know their mom, you don't know which one they belong to. They could all be siblings. That's what thrives in community. What thrives in community is someone not being here for a few weeks and telling their missed when they come in. What thrives in isolation is a lot of the really bad stuff we're seeing. We have to stop calling people out, and we have to start calling people in as a society. Amen. Because you know what? If we're trying to be Jesus followers, we have to do what Jesus did. He didn't lecture him. And he didn't even wait for repentance. He just welcomed him and modeled to him a better way to be. The crowd might lose it, but Jesus goes and has dinner. Zacchaeus did not transform first and then later get invited. He was invited and then he transformed. Because after belonging can come some honesty. After the welcome happens, then comes some repair. And after grace comes legitimate transformation. Zacchaeus stands up and promises restitution just from being invited and involved. And maybe, just maybe, Zacchaeus needed to go on that journey of harm in order to fully experience the radical benefits of God's grace and model it for us for 2,000 years now. And Zacchaeus doesn't stand up and promise restitution. He gives away half of his stuff and does 4 times back. Any of my 12-steppers in the room knows that's one hell of an amends. And he does all that not because he was threatened or called out or shamed, but because he was finally seen. This is not moral perfection. This is how God's grace works within us. This is how Jesus saves, not by standing at a distance, but by entering the house. Not by demanding perfection, but by creating space for conversation. Not by withholding love until someone changes, but by loving them into change. Zacchaeus still had to crawl up the tree, right? So I'm not encouraging you to, hang out with your racist family and nod along, right? Zacchaeus expressed courage to change. But maybe not cutting off that racist family so they can see how beautiful your life is. I just unfollow them on Facebook so you don't get a resentment. And Paul reiterates this in Romans when he says, welcome one another, therefore, just as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God. Well, if we're curious how Christ welcomed us, we have the Zacchaeus story to see how Christ welcomes us. And that's the thing about most spiritual practices. They don't die with us, right? If I experience forgiveness and I don't give you forgiveness, I don't fully experience the forgiveness. If I experience community and I don't offer you community, I don't fully experience community. We're in a world of abundance. And so when we experience welcome, when people are nice and kind and loving to us, it's not only a beautiful thing if we do it to each other, it's our mandate. It's our privilege. Privilege in itself isn't bad. It's how we use that privilege that's bad. Or good. Yeah, or good. Thanks, Ron. In this dictate by Paul in the letter to the Romans, right? It's not a suggestion, it's the foundation of discipleship. The church does not exist for the people that are already perfectly put together. The church exists to be a living sign of Christ's reconciling love in the world. So if you're here today, hear this clearly. You do not have to earn your seat. I guarantee you Rana's going to like you, okay? I guarantee you Rana's going to like you. And she's just sitting in the front row. I look around the room and see a whole slew of people that are going to like you. You don't have to prove you're worthy because you already belong. And if this place feels like home, if Holy Covenant has been a place of grounding or healing or connection for you, then this is our calling. To notice the person at the edge of the room, to make space at the table and to remember names, to lower the temperature of the room by being calm, kind, and human, not by being perfect. Because welcome isn't just how we start, it's how we follow Jesus. And sometimes, more often than we realize, it's how Christ brings healing, restoration, and new life. Thank you.